I thought I was just helping her survive the night. I didn't realize she was about to change my entire life. The boardroom was silent now. The kind of silence that doesn't just fill a room, but presses against your chest until it's hard to breathe. A single lamp glowed in the corner, throwing long shadows across polished mahogany and the scattered remnants of what had once been a war room for corporate giants. The smell of whiskey lingered, sharp and tired, mixing with the faint scent of rain through the half-open window. It had been a long day, one of those that felt like an ending disguised as another late-night meeting. I sat at the far end of the table, sleeves rolled up, tie loose, staring at the empty chairs around me. They'd all gone hours ago. The lawyers, the board members, the accountants who spoke in numbers instead of words. They had left behind charts and excuses, but no solutions. I was the only one still there because walking away from problems had never been my style. I was a fixer, the man people called when their empires began to crack. Across the room, she sat in silence. Isabella Devereaux, heiress to the Devereaux Group. The name that used to command boardrooms and headlines now hung like a fading echo. She was perched at the head of the table, back straight but spirit slumped. The light caught her profile, elegant, distant, almost regal in her exhaustion. Her whiskey glass was still half full, but the ice had melted, just like the woman who held it. She hadn't spoken in almost an hour. Not since the last report had confirmed what everyone already feared. The company her father built was dying, strangled by debt, corruption, and too many people pretending to care. I had seen clients break before, but never like this. Never with such quiet devastation. I leaned forward slightly, my voice low, careful not to shatter what little peace remained. You should go home, Isabella. You've been here for 2 days straight. Her eyes flicked toward me, pale green but dull with fatigue. Home? She murmured, the word dry and bitter. There's no home left, just walls full of memories and silence that smells like my father's cologne. She turned her gaze toward the city skyline beyond the glass wall. The lights flickered against the rain-streaked windows, 1,000 stories unfolding out there while hers was falling apart in here. She looked fragile in that moment, but not weak, like someone who had spent her entire life holding everything together until her own strength became the cage that trapped her. I thought I knew what to do, she said quietly. I thought if I just worked harder, if I became what he was, it would all make sense. Her voice cracked, and for the first time since I'd met her, I saw tears threatening to fall. But it doesn't. Nothing makes sense anymore. I didn't know what to say. I was good at strategy, not grief. I could save companies. But I'd never been able to save people. And yet, something about her made me want to try. Maybe it was the way she stared into the dark, like she was looking for a reason to keep breathing. Maybe it was because I recognized that look. The quiet, aching exhaustion of someone who'd been strong for too long. You don't have to be him, I said finally. You don't have to be anyone but you. Her laugh was soft, hollow, the kind that hurt to hear. You say that like I even know who I am anymore. For a while we just sat there, the sound of rain filling the silence between us. I poured her another drink, then one for myself, though neither of us needed it. The whiskey burned, but not enough to make the night any softer. Then, out of nowhere, she spoke again. Not loud, not dramatic, just a whisper, so faint I almost thought I imagined it. If you can heal my heart, she said, her eyes still on the window, I'll give you the company. The words hung in the air, fragile and dangerous. I froze, the glass halfway to my lips. It wasn't the kind of thing people like her said. She didn't barter emotions. She traded in power. But the way she said it, quiet, trembling, utterly sincere, felt like something deeper than desperation. I studied her face. The hard lines of her confidence had softened, revealing a woman who had spent her entire life trying to live up to someone else's ghost. She wasn't drunk. Not enough for this to be a mistake. She meant it. "You don't have to say things like that," I said softly. "You've been through enough tonight." She turned toward me then, and for the first time, I saw her without the armor. Her voice was steadier when she spoke again. "You think this is about business?" she asked, almost smiling. "You think this company is what's killing me? It's not. It's this." She pressed a hand against her chest. "It's everything I've lost trying to keep it alive. My father, my trust, myself." Her honesty caught me off guard. I had seen CEOs beg, threaten, cry, but not like this. Not in surrender. "If you can heal my heart," she repeated, "I'll give you everything that's left." For a long moment, I said nothing. The logical part of me, the fixer, the strategist, knew she was speaking from exhaustion, that no deal could ever be written around a broken heart. But another part of me, the one I'd buried long ago, heard something else in her voice, a plea, a chance, maybe even a beginning. I could have walked away right then, I should have. But something in her eyes stopped me. There was pain there, yes, but also a spark, a faint, flickering light that hadn't yet gone out. So I stayed. Not because of the promise of ownership, not because of ambition, but because somewhere deep inside, I recognized that she wasn't asking for a savior. She was asking for someone who wouldn't leave when things got hard. Someone who knew what it felt like to lose everything and still keep standing. Outside, thunder rolled across the city, echoing through the glass walls like a warning or a promise. She took a slow breath and looked at me again. "You're different," she said quietly. "Everyone else wants to fix the company. You're the only one who looks like you actually care." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Because in that moment, I realized something terrifying. Maybe I did care. And caring about her was the one thing I couldn't afford to do. I didn't know then that her broken heart would become my biggest responsibility. I'd spent my life repairing what others broke, except myself. That was the irony of my existence. I could walk into a room filled with panic, a board of directors screaming over losses, markets collapsing, and somehow, by the time I walked out, everything looked calm again. I had made a career out of fixing disasters that weren't mine, cleaning up the emotional messes of men and women who could afford to fail. They called me the man who never lost, the consultant who saved what no one else could. It sounded impressive, and maybe once, a long time ago, it even meant something. But over the years, it became my prison. The truth was simple. I didn't win because I was brilliant. I won because I didn't feel anymore. When you stop caring, you stop bleeding. You make decisions with the cold precision of a surgeon and the detachment of a machine. Empathy makes you human, but it also makes you weak. And I'd learned the hard way that weakness was a luxury I couldn't afford. There was a time when I wasn't like this, when I still believed that work was a means to live, not the other way around. That was before my wife, Claire, got sick. Before I watched the woman who filled every corner of my world fade into silence. It's strange how quickly life can lose color. One day you're sitting across from someone you love, sharing burnt coffee and bad jokes, and the next, you're sitting in the same kitchen with the same cup. Except the air feels heavier, emptier. When Claire died, something inside me shut down with her. I buried my heart in her grave and replaced it with a checklist. Wake up, work, win, repeat. People said I was resilient. They mistook survival for strength. In the years that followed, I became a myth in my industry. A fixer who didn't smile, didn't flinch, didn't lose. I was the last phone call companies made before they collapsed. Not because they liked me, but because they needed me. They trusted me the way drowning men trust a lifeline, desperately and only until they're safe again. My office looked like my life, precise, immaculate, lifeless, everything in its place. Books arranged by height, blinds drawn halfway, light muted just enough to keep the world at a distance. I worked late every night because it was easier to face spreadsheets than the quiet of my apartment. Sleep was optional. Silence was unbearable. There were moments when I'd catch my reflection in the glass wall of a boardroom and wonder who the hell I'd become. The tailored suit, the calm voice, the unshakable expression, it was a costume that fit too well. Somewhere beneath it was a man who used to feel things deeply, who used to love cooking on Sundays, who used to dance barefoot in the kitchen with his wife. But that man was gone. I had buried him under deadlines and success stories. People came to me with their ruins, and I gave them order. I was good at that. Too good, maybe. But no one ever asked who fixed me. It was a Thursday when the call came, a day like any other. I was in my office, reviewing a proposal for a tech firm in crisis, when my assistant buzzed in. "Someone named Isabella Devereux wants to speak with you," she said. "She says it's urgent." The name made me pause. Devereux. It was familiar. Old money. Powerful legacy. I remembered the headlines from a few months back. Business tycoon Charles Devereux dies suddenly. Daughter inherits empire. I also remembered the quiet whispers that followed. She's too young, too emotional, too lost. I wasn't interested in another rescue mission for a spoiled heiress with a collapsing kingdom, but something about the tone in my assistant's voice made me hesitate. "Put her through," I said. The line clicked. For a moment, there was only silence. That kind of silence that feels alive, full of things unsaid. Then a voice, soft and steady, came through. "Mr. Hayes?" Her tone was controlled, but I could hear the fatigue beneath it, the faint tremor of someone running out of strength. "This is Isabella Devereux," she continued. "I was told you're the best at fixing what's broken." It wasn't arrogance in her voice. It was desperation disguised as composure. I leaned back in my chair, choosing my words carefully. "That depends on what's broken," I said. There was a pause, and then she exhaled, a sound that carried more weight than words. "Everything," she whispered. "My company, my people, me." I almost ended the call right there. I'd heard versions of that same plea before, different voices, same story. But this time something in the way she said me stopped me. It wasn't a cry for help, it was a confession. "Miss Devereux," I began, keeping my voice even. "I don't usually take emotional cases. I deal in structure, not therapy." Her soft laugh surprised me. It wasn't humor, more like exhaustion given sound. "I don't need therapy, Mr. Hayes. I need survival. I can't let my father's legacy die. I can't let them take what he built." Her words hit harder than I expected. There was fire under the grief. And for a moment, I saw not an heiress, but a fighter. Someone clinging to the last edge of a cliff with bleeding hands. I didn't realize how long I'd been silent until she spoke again. "Please," she said quietly. "You're my last option." I closed my eyes, leaning back in my chair. I'd heard that sentence before, too, but never in that tone. There was no manipulation in it, no theatrics, just truth. I glanced at the photo on my desk, the only one I hadn't packed away. Claire, smiling under the morning sun, her hand reaching for mine. "You can't fix everything," she used to tell me. "Some things are meant to be felt, not fixed." She'd been right, but I'd never learned. Maybe I didn't want to. "I'll take a look," I heard myself say. When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the city lights through my window. I had a bad feeling about this. It wasn't the company that worried me. It was her voice. There was something in it that didn't sound like business. It sounded like someone trying not to drown. And I should have said no. Her company looked flawless from the outside, but rot hides best behind glass. The Devereux Group headquarters rose from the city skyline like a monument to perfection. The kind of building that made people crane their necks and whisper words like power, legacy, and untouchable. Its mirrored facade caught the morning sun, reflecting gold and sky blue, hiding the truth behind its flawless symmetry. From a distance, it looked alive, pulsing with ambition, humming with purpose. But the moment I stepped through its glass doors, I knew something was off. The air was too quiet. Not the focused kind of quiet that comes with productivity, but the brittle, suffocating kind that follows fear. The marble lobby gleamed. The receptionist smiled too wide. And every employee that passed me did so with the cautious politeness of someone walking through a minefield. You could sense it, tension woven into every greeting, anxiety buried under professional smiles. "Mr. Hayes!" The voice came from behind me, crisp and practiced. A man in his 40s extended his hand. Patrick Moore, Chief Operations Officer. His handshake was firm, his smile mechanical. "We've heard a lot about you. Isabella said you'd be joining us to evaluate the situation." "Evaluate," I repeated, scanning the space. "That's one word for it." He led me through a corridor lined with glass offices, each one a perfect reflection of the company's aesthetic. Polished surfaces, designer furniture, sterile air. But behind those transparent walls, I caught glimpses of whispered arguments, blank stares at computer screens, and meetings that ended with clenched jaws. The building was beautiful, but it felt like a tomb. When we entered the executive floor, the atmosphere thickened. The senior staff stood gathered around a long conference table, papers spread out like evidence in a trial. Faces turned as we entered, some curious, others wary. I could see it instantly. Division. Half the room wanted me there. The other half didn't. A woman in a sleek gray suit leaned back in her chair. "So this is the famous fixer," she said, her tone laced with skepticism. "What exactly are you fixing this time? Our balance sheets or our CEO?" Patrick cleared his throat sharply. "Elena," he warned. I didn't rise to the bait. In my line of work, you learn that resistance always wears the loudest voice in the room. I simply opened my folder, scanning the preliminary reports. "I'll fix whatever's broken," I said evenly. "Once I figure out what that is." Across the table, Isabella sat quietly. She wasn't wearing the same armor she had in the boardroom the night we first spoke. Today, she looked different. Composed, yes, but drained. Her posture was flawless, her tone calm, but her eyes betrayed her. They had that glassy sheen of someone fighting exhaustion with sheer willpower. "Mr. Hayes is here at my request," she said, her voice steady but tired. "He'll have full access to all departments. Cooperate with him." No one argued. Not out loud, at least. But I saw it. The subtle exchange of glances, the flickers of resentment. In a world built on power, no one likes an outsider stepping in to take control, especially not one who wasn't afraid to look past the numbers. As the meeting dragged on, it became clearer just how deep the cracks ran. Financials weren't just strained, they were bleeding. The company had expanded recklessly under her father's final years, fueled more by pride than sense. Projects half-finished, partnerships soured, departments at war with each other. It wasn't mismanagement. It was decay disguised as growth. And then there was the human side, the one no report could capture. Employees who whispered in corners, executives who smiled when she entered but rolled their eyes when she turned away. The grief of losing a leader had long turned into greed for his throne. After the meeting, I found Isabella alone in her father's office. The room was like a museum, untouched since his death. The heavy oak desk, the framed awards, the faint scent of old books and cigar smoke still lingering in the air. She stood by the window, staring at the city below, the morning light tracing her outline in gold. "You built this empire," I said quietly, stepping closer. "But it feels like it's been hollow for a long time." She didn't turn around. "He built it," she said softly. "I'm just trying not to let it die." On her wrist, I noticed an old watch, elegant, vintage, with a cracked leather strap. She caught me looking and smiled faintly. "It was his," she said. "He wore it every day until that day." I frowned. "It still works?" Her smile faded. The clock stopped the moment he collapsed in his office. I had it repaired 3 times, but it always stops at the same minute. So I stopped trying. She brushed her fingers lightly over the face of the watch. Now it's just a reminder of how quickly everything can stop, and how long you can spend pretending it hasn't. There was something haunting about her honesty. Most CEOs built walls of arrogance around their pain. Isabella wore hers like a quiet, invisible crown. "You know what the problem is?" I asked after a pause. "You're trying to lead a company that doesn't believe you belong here." She turned then, meeting my gaze for the first time since the meeting. "They think I'm weak," she said simply. "They're waiting for me to fall apart so they can pick up the pieces." I studied her for a moment, the calm mask over trembling hands, the measured words over a breaking heart. "And are they right?" Her eyes flickered. "Not yet." The answer was brave. It was also terrifyingly honest. That afternoon, I walked the halls alone. I spoke to employees, read reports, watched interactions. Every smile was strained. Every conversation carried an edge. Even the walls seemed to hum with tension. It was a place pretending to be alive, but the pulse was gone. In one conference room, I found a portrait of her father, Charles Devereux, smiling confidently beside a quote engraved beneath, "We are only as strong as our people." I stared at it for a long time, then turned toward the glass corridor where Isabella was walking alone, her shoulders straight, her pace deliberate. She was trying so hard to keep her world from collapsing that she didn't notice it had already started to fall apart. And that's when it hit me. The realization that would change everything about how I saw her and what I had to do. This wasn't a company problem, it was a heart problem. Sometimes it takes 2 broken people to start fixing anything at all. The building was nearly empty that night. Most of the staff had gone home hours ago, leaving the Devereux Tower in silence, the kind of silence that amplifies every heartbeat, every breath, every thought you try to ignore. The city glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a sprawl of golden lights stretching into infinity, while the hum of the air conditioner filled the quiet like white noise against loneliness. Isabella was still at her desk. She had taken off her blazer, rolled up her sleeves, and pulled her hair into a loose knot that didn't quite hide the exhaustion in her face. The glow of her desk lamp softened the sharpness of her features, turning her from an untouchable CEO into something far more human, a woman who hadn't slept properly in weeks, who was still fighting even when she no longer knew how. I stood across from her, leaning over the table where spreadsheets, financial reports, and scribbled notes were scattered like debris after a storm. We'd been at it for hours, analyzing numbers, tracing losses, hunting for where the empire had started to crack. But it wasn't just the company we were dissecting anymore. Every silence between us carried a different kind of weight, one that had nothing to do with business. She rubbed her temples, exhaling. "Every time I think I'm getting closer to fixing it, I find another hole, another betrayal." I watched her for a moment. "You think it's sabotage?" "I think it's trust," she said bitterly, "and how easily it dies." Her voice cracked slightly on the last word. I looked down at the papers, then back at her. "You don't have to do this alone," I said quietly. She gave a small, humorless laugh. "Don't I? Because from where I'm sitting, that's exactly what I'm doing. My board wants control, my investors want blood, my staff wants answers I don't have, and the people I thought I could trust most have already turned their backs." There was a pause, long and fragile. Then she added, almost as an afterthought, "I'm tired, Hayes. Not just of fighting, of pretending." The way she said my name sent a small tremor through the air. It wasn't the polished tone of a CEO giving instructions. It was a whisper from someone standing too close to the edge. I sat down across from her, folding my hands. "Pretending what?" "That I'm not scared," she said softly. "That I know what I'm doing. That I'm my father." Her eyes glistened, the mask slipping just enough for me to see the fracture underneath. I'd seen 100 executives break before, in boardrooms, in offices, in hotel lounges at 2 in the morning. But never like this. Her vulnerability wasn't loud. It was quiet, almost graceful. "You don't have to be him," I said. She looked up, studying me like she was trying to find something hidden behind my calm. "Then who am I supposed to be?" "Someone who survives," I said. She gave me a look that was half a question, half disbelief. "And what about you?" she asked softly. "Who are you when you're not saving other people?" For a moment, I couldn't answer. The question was too direct, too close to something I hadn't touched in years. I looked away, my jaw tightening. "I don't know anymore." Her gaze lingered on me, quiet and patient, as though she knew there was more. I don't know what made me say it. Maybe the hour, maybe the way she looked at me like she wouldn't judge what she found. But I finally spoke. "My wife used to say I could fix anything," I said, my voice low. She was wrong. Isabella's expression softened. "You lost her?" I nodded. "Cancer. 3 years ago." I didn't look up. One day I was making breakfast for us, and the next I was making it alone. I kept working because it was the only thing I could control. Fixing things was the only way to stop myself from falling apart. The silence that followed wasn't awkward. It was heavy with understanding. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes glimmering in the lamplight. "Maybe that's why you're here," she said. "Because we're both trying to fix something that can't be fixed." "Maybe," I said quietly. "Or maybe it's because broken people understand each other better than whole ones ever could." A faint smile curved her lips. The first real one I'd seen that night. "You really believe that?" "I believe it's the only reason we're still standing," I said. For a while, neither of us moved. The city lights flickered across the room like reflections of our thoughts, bright, distant, unreachable. Then Isabella stood, walking slowly toward the window. The glow from the skyline painted her silhouette in gold. She turned her father's watch around her wrist absent-mindedly, staring at the time frozen on its face. When she finally spoke again, her voice was steady, but there was a tenderness in it that hadn't been there before. "You saved my company," she said, "and I'll learn to feel again." It wasn't a joke, it wasn't a metaphor, it was a pact, a fragile one, born in the space between exhaustion and hope. I stood too, stepping closer until I was beside her. For a moment, neither of us said anything. The air between us was charged, not with business tension, but with something deeper, something dangerous. The kind of connection that begins quietly and ends by rewriting everything it touches. "Deal," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned her head slightly, meeting my eyes. There was something in her gaze I hadn't seen before. Something alive. "You really think you can save it?" I should have said no. I should have reminded her that companies don't heal the same way people do. But instead, I said, "I think if I save you, the company will follow." Her breath caught, her lips parting as if to say something, but she didn't. The silence between us spoke louder than words ever could. For the first time since I'd met her, Isabella Devereaux didn't look untouchable. She looked human, raw, real, and it terrified me. Not because of what it meant for her, but because of what it was doing to me. Her promise sounded impossible, and that's exactly why I believed it. Healing doesn't start with love, it starts with trust. The next few weeks were a blur of chaos, strategy, and quiet rebuilding. From dawn until the city lights dimmed again, Isabella and I worked side by side, breathing life back into an empire that had forgotten how to live. The Devereaux Group was like a wounded animal, proud, dangerous, but salvageable if handled with care. And somehow, she was learning to care again. I started by giving her control. Real control, not the kind that came from signatures or staged board meetings. "You don't fix people by speaking for them," I told her one morning, sliding a stack of reports across her desk. "You fix them by teaching them to use their own voice again." She had frowned, skeptical. "You think I don't have one?" "I think you stopped using it the moment they stopped listening," I said simply. That was the beginning. Every day after that, I made her lead the meetings herself. I sat beside her, silent at first, watching as she faced the same executives who had spent months undermining her. The first few times she faltered, her voice soft, uncertain, her eyes darting to me for reassurance. But then something shifted. She started holding her ground, asking sharper questions, refusing to let the room swallow her. I still remember the first time she made the board fall silent. A senior member had questioned her decision to cut a failing subsidiary. His tone was dripping with condescension, the kind reserved for people they believe don't belong. "Mr. Caldwell," she said evenly, "you've been managing that division for 6 years, and in 6 years its revenue has declined by 37%. Tell me, are you suggesting I keep it running so you can continue failing at it?" The room went still. Caldwell's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. And then, just barely, I saw it. The ghost of a smile tugging at the corner of Isabella's lips. After the meeting, I found her in her office, staring out the window, the city lights dancing in her reflection. "That was brutal," I said, half smiling. "Necessary," she replied, her voice calm. "You were right. They only respect strength, so I gave them some." She turned toward me, and for the first time, there was light in her eyes. Not defiance, not anger, but something quieter. Pride. From there, the change came slowly but surely. The tension in the halls eased. Projects restarted. The staff began to look at her not as the fragile daughter of a dead legend, but as a leader with her own fire. And with every victory, no matter how small, she started to breathe again. It was in the little things at first. The way she laughed, softly, during late-night planning sessions. The way she hummed under her breath while reading reports. The way her voice grew steadier every time she said the words, "We can fix this." But the more she healed, the harder it became to ignore what was happening between us. It wasn't planned. It wasn't even spoken. It existed in the spaces between sentences, in the moments when her hand brushed mine as we passed papers across the desk, or when our eyes met for a second too long during quiet hours. One night, as we sat surrounded by open files and half-empty coffee cups, she said something that caught me off guard. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, not looking up from her notes, "if people like us are meant to be happy?" I set my pen down. "People like us?" "The ones who fix things," she said softly. "The ones who carry everyone else's weight. Maybe happiness skips us, so others can have theirs." I studied her face. The tired grace of someone who'd spent too long pretending to be invincible. "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe happiness just shows up in smaller pieces for us. A good day, a quiet laugh, the right person sitting across from you when the world falls apart." She looked up then, her gaze meeting mine. There was a question in her eyes that neither of us dared to voice. "I'll take that," she whispered finally. Our days fell into rhythm. Morning briefings, strategy calls, long hours that blurred into night. But somewhere in the middle of balance sheets and boardroom battles, something unspoken began to bloom. I'd bring her coffee in the mornings, and she'd start bringing me tea at night, always pretending it was coincidence. I'd leave classical music playing softly while I worked, and she'd hum to the melody without realizing. Sometimes she'd fall asleep on the couch in her office, exhaustion finally claiming her, and I'd drape my jacket over her shoulders before leaving. It was the kind of closeness that doesn't need words, the kind that builds slowly, like trust does, until you realize it's become a lifeline. One evening, after a particularly tense day with the board, she found me in the break room, sleeves rolled up, cleaning spilled coffee from the counter. "You don't have to do that," she said, smiling faintly. "Someone has to," I replied. She watched me for a long moment. "You're different from them." "Different how?" "You don't see people as tools," she said softly. "You see them as people, even me." I didn't know how to respond to that. Instead, I looked at her, and in that silence, she seemed to understand the answer I couldn't give. As the company stabilized, the rumors began. Whispers in the hallways, sideways glances. We ignored them. or tried to. But no matter how much we kept it professional, there was no denying what was happening. Every late-night conversation pulled us closer. Every shared victory tied us tighter. One night, after a long day of negotiations, we stood by the window overlooking the city. The skyline shimmered, and the reflection of the lights danced across her face. She turned to me, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't remember the last time I felt like I could breathe," she said. "You can now," I said quietly. "You just forgot how." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "Then keep reminding me." I didn't answer, but I didn't need to. In that moment, I realized that the more I helped her rebuild, the more she was rebuilding me too. Every laugh, every late-night talk, every moment of trust, it was stitching back parts of me I thought were gone forever. But as her company began to rise from the ashes, I started to feel something I hadn't expected: fear. Because the closer I got to saving her company, the harder it became to protect my heart. We started every day as colleagues, and ended it as something we couldn't name. The line between business and something deeper had always been blurry, but I never saw it truly vanish until that night. It wasn't planned, not like most things in Isabella's world. It just happened, the way storms do when the air gets too heavy to hold them back. It had been one of those endless days, filled with back-to-back meetings, tense negotiations, and the kind of corporate warfare that left everyone pretending to be calm while silently bleeding beneath their suits. By the time the building emptied, we were the only two left on the executive floor. The city outside was soaked in the aftermath of rain. Glass towers reflecting streaks of wet neon, streets glistening under passing headlights, the kind of night that made everything feel both alive and unbearably lonely. I was gathering my things when she appeared at my office door. Her hair was down, her jacket gone, and there was a softness to her I hadn't seen before. "You're still here," she said, leaning against the frame. "So are you," I replied. "I ordered food," she said. "Chinese. The delivery guy thinks this floor is cursed. He wouldn't come up without an escort." I laughed quietly. "Guess that makes us the ghosts?" She smiled, just barely. "Then come haunt the boardroom with me." We ate at the long table that had seen more battles than dinners, takeout containers spread between stacks of reports. For a while, we didn't talk about business. We talked about everything else: music, travel, the kind of food that reminded us of home. I learned that her favorite dish was spicy noodles, and that she hated champagne, but drank it anyway because it was expected of her. She learned that I used to cook for my wife every Sunday, and still couldn't bring myself to touch the cast-iron skillet she'd bought me the year before she died. Somewhere between laughter and silence, something shifted. It wasn't sudden. It was quiet. The kind of shift you don't notice until it's already happened. Her laughter softened, her gaze lingered longer, and the space between us at the table began to feel like a living thing, something fragile and full of meaning. "Do you ever get tired of pretending you're fine?" she asked suddenly. I looked at her, caught off guard. "All the time?" She nodded, staring at her reflection in the window. I used to think strength meant not showing pain. But lately, I've realized strength is just pain with better posture. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Outside, the rain began again, soft at first, then heavier, tracing rivers down the glass. The sound filled the silence between us, and for a long time, we just listened. She got up from her chair and walked towards the window, her hand resting on the cool surface. "My father died in this building," she said quietly. The words hung in the air like a confession. I stood slowly, unsure whether to move closer or give her space. "I didn't know," I said softly. "No one does," she replied. "The news said it was a heart attack, but it wasn't that simple." Her reflection shimmered against the rain-slicked glass, eyes distant, voice trembling. He'd been under investigation for months. Financial irregularities. He never told me. I found out the night before he died. An anonymous email filled with evidence, lies, half-truths, I confronted him, and he swore he'd fix it. The next morning, they found him in his office chair. The watch stopped at 7:42. I swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. She turned then, her expression fractured between grief and guilt. I've spent every day since then trying to clean up his mess, trying to prove that I'm not him. But no matter what I do, I still feel like I'm living in his shadow. Like every success is just an apology he never got to make. Her voice broke on the last word, and something inside me cracked with it. I crossed the room without thinking, stopping just a few feet away. "It wasn't your fault," I said quietly. She shook her head. "You don't know that." "I know what guilt looks like when it isn't yours to carry," I said. "And that's what you've been doing, carrying someone else's ghosts." She closed her eyes, her breathing unsteady. I don't know how to stop. I hesitated for only a moment before reaching out, my hand resting lightly over hers on the glass. The contact was simple, barely a touch, but it felt like crossing a line I'd spent months pretending didn't exist. "You start by forgiving him," I said. "And then, someday, you forgive yourself." She turned her hand under mine, her fingers trembling as they closed around my palm. The warmth of her skin against mine was startling, grounding. She didn't pull away. "I don't know how to do that either," she whispered. "Then let me help you," I said. Her eyes opened, meeting mine. There was no pretense now, no armor, just raw, quiet exhaustion and trust. For a moment, the city disappeared. There was only the sound of rain, the hum of the building, and two people standing too close, breathing the same uneven air. Her gaze dropped to my hand, then back to my face. "You shouldn't be this kind," she said softly. "It'll ruin you." "Maybe I'm already ruined," I replied. She let out a breath that was half laugh, half sob. "You make it sound like that's a good thing." "Sometimes it is," I said. The silence stretched, electric and tender all at once. Then she whispered, "You should go." But when I didn't move, she added, almost too softly to hear, "Stay?" And I did. Just when her heart started to heal, the ghosts came knocking. It happened on a Tuesday, one of those deceptively calm mornings that lull you into thinking the storm has passed, only to remind you that it was merely catching its breath. The company was stabilizing, numbers were rising, the board had begun to trust Isabella's leadership again, and the staff, once divided, had started to believe in her. For the first time since I'd arrived, the Devereaux Tower felt alive. But peace is never permanent in a place, built on ambition and legacy. The first sign of trouble came in the form of a single email. Isabella was in her office, sunlight spilling across her desk, when she opened it. I was beside her, reviewing quarterly projections, when her hand froze mid-air. Her expression changed, just slightly, but enough for me to feel the air tighten. She didn't speak at first, just stared at the screen. Then she said, almost in a whisper, "He's back." "Who?" I asked. She turned the monitor toward me. The name in the sender line was one I didn't recognize, Ethan Calloway. But the look in her eyes told me everything I needed to know. "My father's former partner," she said, "the one who nearly destroyed the company 5 years ago." "What does he want?" She swallowed. "To finish what he started." The email was short, cruelly so, a single paragraph laced with the confidence of someone who knew how to strike fear where it hurt most. "We should talk," it read. "I still have what your father left unfinished. Let's not make this public." By afternoon, his name was everywhere. News alerts, industry blogs, a leaked report suggesting Calloway had re-entered the market, acquiring stakes in several companies linked to Devereaux subsidiaries. And worse, whispers that he was planning a hostile takeover. The board panicked. Investors called emergency meetings, and the media, always hungry for a scandal, did what it did best. It turned speculation into fact. Within 24 hours, headlines screamed across every financial page. "Calloway returns. Deathbed secrets threaten Devereaux's legacy. Mystery consultant or secret partner? Who is the man behind Isabella Devereaux?" That last one came with a photograph. Grainy, but clear enough. Isabella and me, standing too close in the rain outside the building. Her head tilted toward me, my hand barely touching hers. The image was innocent in reality, but intimate in context. The kind of picture that didn't tell a story so much as it invited people to invent their own. By the next morning, the whispers had turned into accusations. "Do you realize what they're saying about you?" Patrick, the COO, hissed as we stepped into the boardroom. "Half the shareholders think you're manipulating her, that you're positioning yourself to take over the company through her." I met his glare calmly. "They're wrong," he snorted. "Truth doesn't matter, Hayes. Perception does." When Isabella walked in, the room went silent. She looked immaculate. Black suit, hair sleek, eyes sharper than I'd ever seen. But I could tell by the way her hand trembled as she set down her folder that she hadn't slept. The chairman cleared his throat. "Miss Devereaux, the situation with Mr. Calloway has become complicated. His claims are gaining traction. And now, with this—" He gestured toward the stack of printed articles about us. "Our reputation is at risk." Someone else muttered, "So is the company's credibility." For a long moment, Isabella said nothing. Then she stood, her voice steady but low. "If you think my personal life is more important than the empire my father built, you're welcome to resign. But until then, remember who's running this company." It should have ended there. But Calloway wasn't finished. He gave an interview 2 days later, standing outside his Manhattan office, smiling for the cameras. "I built half that company," he said, his tone dripping with charm. "Her father and I made promises before he died. I just want what's mine." When asked about Isabella, he smirked. "She's young, naive, surrounded by influences. It's sad to see someone trying to play CEO when she's clearly not making her own decisions." It was a well-placed dagger, one designed to cut through reputation and pride all at once. That night, I found her in her office again. The lights were dim, the city glowing outside like an audience waiting for her to fail. She was pacing, her heels clicking against the marble like the beat of a countdown. "I can't do this," she said suddenly. "Every headline, every whisper. It's like I'm reliving his mistakes all over again." "You're not him," I said. "Tell that to them," she snapped, pointing towards the window as if the whole city stood behind it, watching. "They already decided who I am. And now with you—" She stopped herself, exhaling sharply. "They think I'm sleeping my way through salvation." I took a step closer. "Let them talk. The people who matter will know the truth." "Will they?" she said bitterly. "Because I'm starting to wonder if even you do." The words stung more than I expected. "You think I'm here for that?" "I don't know anymore," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Everyone's wanted something from me. My father's partners, the board, the press, they all take pieces of me and call it loyalty. I thought you were different." I reached for her hand, but she stepped back. The distance between us had never felt larger. The next morning, we walked into the storm together, a press conference designed to stop the bleeding. The reporters were merciless, their questions sharpened to wound. "Miss Devereaux, is it true Mr. Calloway has evidence of embezzlement?" "Mr. Hayes, what exactly is your relationship with her? Can you confirm whether the Devereaux Group is facing insolvency?" I could see Isabella struggling to hold her composure, her nails digging into the edge of the podium. So I stepped forward before she could speak. "My relationship with Miss Devereaux," I said clearly, "is one of respect. I was hired to save a company, not exploit a woman. And if anyone here believes they can question her capability while hiding behind rumors, I suggest they take a closer look at who's really benefiting from them." The room went silent. Cameras flashed. Isabella's eyes met mine, wide, wet, and full of gratitude she couldn't express. But later that night, in the quiet of her office, she looked at me differently. Not with relief, with fear. "You shouldn't have done that," she said softly. "You just painted a target on yourself." "Then let them aim," I said. She looked away, her voice trembling. "You said you could fix everything," she whispered. Then fix this before I lose everything again. Sometimes the truth doesn't hurt. It shatters. I'd seen betrayal before. It was predictable. Sharp, fast, almost efficient in the way it burned everything to ash. But this time it wasn't a blade in my back. It was something slower, quieter. The kind of pain that comes not from an enemy's strike, but from someone you would have taken a bullet for pulling the trigger instead. It started with an envelope. A single manila folder placed neatly in the center of Isabella's desk early one morning. No name, no return address. Just 3 words scrawled on the front in black ink. For your eyes only. By the time I walked into her office, she was already standing behind her desk, pale and rigid, her eyes locked on the papers inside. "Where did this come from?" she asked, without looking up. I frowned. "What is it?" "Proof," she said softly. "Apparently, proof that you've been working with Calloway." My stomach went cold. "What?" She slid one of the papers toward me. It was a series of transaction records. Money wired from an offshore account, the recipient name blurred but familiar enough to make my pulse stutter. My name, my signature, my initials scrawled beside every transfer. I stared at it, disbelief giving way to a sickening dread. "These are fake." "Are they?" she asked, her voice trembling, not with anger, but with something worse, fear. "You think I'd do this?" I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know what to think," she said, pacing now, the folder clutched in her hands like evidence she didn't want to believe in. "Calloway's been buying influence everywhere. Half the board already thinks you're a plant, and now this—" She stopped, breathing hard. "It's too perfect, too detailed." I stepped closer. "Then you know it's not real. You know me." She turned sharply. "Do I?" The words hit harder than I expected. For weeks, we'd built something fragile but real, trust, closeness, understanding. I'd watched her learn to breathe again, to fight again, to lead. And now, one envelope, one lie, was enough to make her question everything. "I risked my career for you," I said quietly. "I've put my name, my reputation, everything I am on the line to keep this company alive, to keep you safe." Her jaw tightened. "And that's exactly what makes this so dangerous. Because if it's true, you didn't just betray me. You destroyed the only thing I have left." She turned away, her shoulders shaking. "Please, just go. I need time." I wanted to argue. I wanted to grab the papers and tear them apart, to shout the truth until it filled every corner of the glass tower. But something in her tone, the tremor, the exhaustion, told me that anything I said now would only sound like noise. So I did the one thing I swore I'd never do. I left. The next few days were chaos. Calloway used the forged evidence like gasoline on dry wood. Leaks appeared in the media, documents, photos, fabricated emails. Every story told the same lie, that I'd been feeding him inside information in exchange for offshore payments. My name became a curse whispered in boardrooms, and a headline shouted across business news cycles. Through it all, Isabella said nothing. No statement, no denial. Just silence. That silence said everything. I cleaned out my office in the middle of the night. The corridors were empty, the glass walls reflecting ghosts of a life I'd poured myself into. I paused for a long moment at her door, that familiar place where so many nights had turned into something more than work. The light was still on. Through the frosted glass, I could see her silhouette, sitting at her desk, motionless, staring at nothing. I almost knocked. Almost. Instead, I whispered to the quiet. "I would have died before betraying you." Then I walked away. Leaving that building felt like walking out of a chapter I hadn't finished writing. Every step echoed with something unsaid, something unresolved. But even as I left, I couldn't stop protecting her. The truth had teeth, and it was already biting. Calloway had launched a full-scale assault on the company, leaked trade secrets, false reports, market manipulation. He wasn't after profit. He was after her. And I couldn't let him win. From a distance, I worked quietly, feeding information to an investigative journalist I trusted, tracing the forged documents back to their source. I watched as the story unfolded, connections between Calloway's offshore accounts, the private investigator he'd hired, and the internal leak that had made it all possible. But it wasn't easy staying in the shadows, watching her fight a war I once promised to help her win. Every photo that surfaced of her at a meeting, every headline questioning her leadership, every weary smile she gave to the cameras, it all reminded me that I had become a ghost in the story we built together. Then, one night, I saw her on television, standing at a charity gala, the same kind of event where this entire story had started. She was stunning, unshakable, every inch the woman the world expected her to be. But when the reporter asked about the rumors, about me, I saw it. The split second before she answered. The hesitation. The flicker of pain she couldn't quite hide. "No comment," she said finally, her voice calm but fragile. I turned off the TV before the interview ended. That night, I drove past the Devereux Tower one last time. The building gleamed under the city lights, a monument of glass and ambition. I parked across the street, sitting in silence, watching her office light burning in the dark. In that glow, I could almost see her, head bowed, hand over her face, the same way she looked that first night we met. The night she'd whispered a promise that started everything. "If you can heal my heart, I'll give you the company." I thought I had. But somewhere along the way, I'd forgotten the one thing she didn't ask for. To protect her from herself. I wanted to go in. To tell her everything I'd uncovered. To tell her that the betrayal wasn't real. That I hadn't left because I stopped caring. I left because I cared too much. But the truth was simple and cruel. She wasn't ready to hear it yet. So I sat there, under the glow of her window, and whispered the only goodbye I could manage. I walked out of her office, but I left my heart at her desk. Healing stops when pride starts speaking louder than love. The days that followed my departure stretched into weeks, though time felt strange, elastic, uneven, impossible to measure. Without the rhythm of our meetings, the tension of deadlines, the steady hum of purpose, my life sank back into something that barely resembled living. I had gone from boardrooms filled with voices to mornings filled with nothing but the sound of my own breathing. At first, I tried to convince myself it was better this way. That distance was necessary, healthy, inevitable. I told myself that I'd done the right thing, that leaving her was the only way to protect her reputation, to give her the space to fight her battles without my name attached to every headline. But the truth was simpler, and far more painful. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because she stopped believing in me, and I didn't know how to stay where trust no longer lived. I rented a small apartment on the east side, nothing like the penthouse suites or polished offices I was used to. It was quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of place where the ticking of the clock became company. I started consulting again, small contracts at first, rebuilding for other people what I'd once built for her. I was good at pretending to move on. I'd done it before, but this time, it didn't work. Every project felt hollow. Every client's victory sounded like static. Because no matter what I fixed, I couldn't fix the one thing I actually cared about. And somewhere across the city, in the glass tower that had once been my second home, she was unraveling too, though she didn't let the world see it. Through whispers from contacts and headlines that never stopped coming, I saw the signs. Her new CFO resigned. The marketing division fractured. 2 key contracts fell apart. The stock dipped, then plummeted. Every effort to hold the company together without me only seemed to expose more of the damage Calloway had left behind. But more than that, I could see it in her eyes, even through photos. The way she'd smile for the cameras, but her eyes looked lost, distant, tired. The fire I'd helped her rediscover was fading again, replaced by the weight of trying to do everything alone. It was strange, watching her from afar, like standing outside a burning house, knowing that you once built part of it, knowing that running back inside would only make it worse. Meanwhile, my own world had gone quiet in a way I didn't recognize. I'd stopped listening to music. I'd stopped cooking, even though it used to be the only thing that made me feel close to something human. I'd stopped reaching out to people. Work was all I had left, and even that started to lose its meaning. There were nights when I'd find myself driving aimlessly through the city, my car tracing familiar routes, until I'd inevitably find myself parked across from the Devereaux building. I'd sit there for an hour, sometimes two, watching the floors light up and fade one by one, always waiting for the one light that never went off. Her office. She was still there, still fighting, still pretending she could do it alone. I wondered if she ever thought of me, if she ever looked at that desk, the one where I'd sat beside her for countless nights, and remembered what it felt like to not be alone. But pride is a cruel thing. It builds walls where bridges should be, and neither of us was willing to make the first call. Months passed like that, two people trapped in silence, each waiting for the other to break it. Then came the night I saw her name in the news again. Devereaux Group faces major audit scandal. CEO under pressure to resign. I read every word of that article twice, each line a slow punch to the gut. The audit was fake. I knew that instantly. Calloway's last move, the one I'd warned her about, was finally unfolding. She was losing everything we'd fought to rebuild, and there was nothing I could do. Not officially. Not without proof. That night, I poured myself a drink for the first time in months and sat on my balcony, staring at the skyline that once defined our lives. The rain came again, as it always seemed to when everything started to fall apart. I let it soak me, as if I could wash away the ache by standing still long enough. I thought about the last words she'd said to me. You said you could fix everything. Then fix this, before I lose everything again. And I'd failed. Not because I couldn't fix it, but because she never let me try. I closed my eyes and imagined her sitting in that same office, surrounded by silence, by memories, by ghosts. I could see her running her fingers over that broken watch, the one that had stopped at the moment her father died, and wondering if this was what destiny felt like. Always losing the things you love to the same mistakes. Then, just as I was finishing my drink, my phone buzzed. It was late, well past midnight, and for a moment I thought I was imagining it. The screen glowed in the darkness, and when I saw her name, my heart stopped. I stared at it, breath caught in my throat. After all the silence, all the distance, all the pretending, she was calling me. My hand trembled as I answered. For a moment, all I heard was her breathing. Uneven. Quiet. The kind that comes from holding yourself together too long. Isabella? I said softly. There was another pause. Then her voice. Cracked, exhausted, but still carrying that same fragile strength that had always undone me. It's falling apart, she whispered. Everything. The company. Me. I pressed the phone tighter to my ear, my chest tightening. She took a shuddering breath. And so am I. The line went silent after that, but the words kept echoing, through the night, through my chest, through every memory I'd spent months trying to bury. And that's when I knew. The story I thought was over had just begun again. I told myself I was done with her world, that I had already played my part, given everything I had, and walked away with what was left of my pride. But some stories don't end when you close the door. They echo until you have no choice but to turn back and face them again. And when Isabella called that night, her voice breaking on the other end of the line, I knew, no matter what had happened between us, I wasn't done with her. Not yet. By morning, I was standing in front of the Devereaux Tower again. The building loomed above me, familiar yet foreign, like returning to a home that had changed while you were gone. The revolving doors hissed open, and I stepped inside. It smelled the same: coffee, polished marble, faint perfume and tension. But something was different. The people moved slower. The energy was off. It wasn't the empire I had helped her rebuild. It was a ghost of it. When the elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, I found her there, standing by the window, shoulders squared, eyes red-rimmed but determined. She turned as soon as she heard the doors slide shut. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Two people who had said too many words, and not enough truth. "You came?" she said finally, her voice quieter than I remembered. "You asked," I replied. Her lips trembled slightly, then curved into the faintest, most fragile smile. "I didn't think you would. I didn't think you'd still need me," I said, half meaning it, half not. "I don't," she said quickly, then added, almost to herself, "I just didn't know who else to call." The admission hung between us like unfinished business. She turned toward the long table, where files, contracts, and damage reports were scattered in organized chaos. "The audit was fabricated," she said. "Calloway's behind it. He bribed a compliance officer, forged signatures, everything. But the board's scared. They want to suspend me until it's cleared." "Then we clear it," I said simply. Her head snapped up. "You'd help me again? After everything I—" "Don't," I said softly. "We both made mistakes." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, she nodded. "All right. One last time." We worked side by side for the next 72 hours straight. No sleep, no rest. Just numbers, data, evidence, and the weight of two people trying to rebuild not just a company, but something far more fragile. Trust. At first, it was strictly professional. Reports, emails, strategy. But somewhere between the frustration and exhaustion, the distance started to melt. It happened in small moments. The way she'd glance at me when I wasn't looking. The way her voice softened when she said my name. The way our hands brushed over the same document, lingering a second too long before pulling away. By the second night, the exhaustion hit us both. We were sitting across from each other, surrounded by papers and empty coffee cups. She leaned back in her chair, eyes half closed, the lamplight tracing her profile in gold. "You shouldn't have come back," she murmured. "Maybe not," I said, staring at her. "But you called anyway." Her eyes opened slowly, finding mine. "You make it sound like I had a choice." "Did you?" She smiled, faint, wistful. "You're the only person who ever told me the truth, even when I didn't want to hear it." "Maybe that's why you hated me," I said. "Maybe that's why I loved you," she whispered. The room fell still. The words were quiet, almost an accident, but once they were out, there was no taking them back. She didn't look away this time, and neither did I. We didn't touch. We didn't move. We just sat there, breathing in the weight of everything we hadn't said. The nights, the laughter, the pain, the silence. It wasn't a confession. It was recognition. By morning, we had what we needed. The proof that would exonerate her. I arranged the documents into a timeline, linking Calloway's false audit trail with his offshore accounts and a journalist's encrypted testimony. When we presented it to the board later that afternoon, the reaction was immediate. Shock, denial, and then, slowly, acceptance. Patrick stood at the end of the table, flipping through the evidence. "This is airtight," he admitted reluctantly. "Calloway's finished." The chairman cleared his throat. "Then so is this crisis. Miss Devereaux, we owe you an apology." Isabella nodded once, calm and composed. "No," she said quietly. "You owe this company an apology for believing lies before looking for truth." There was something regal about her in that moment, unbreakable, untouchable. The woman I had met months ago, scared and grieving, had become someone her father would have been proud of. After the meeting, we stood together in the quiet of her office, watching the city bleed into sunset. The tension that had once filled this space was gone, replaced by a fragile peace. "You did it," I said softly. "No," she said, turning toward me. "We did." Her gaze lingered on me, and I could feel it, The warmth, the ache, the gratitude that ran deeper than words. "I kept telling myself this was about saving the company," she said finally. "But it wasn't." "What was it about then?" I asked. She stepped closer, her voice barely above a whisper. "You. It was always about you." There it was. The truth neither of us had dared to say. It landed softly but hit hard, like the first drop of rain before a storm. I took a breath, but before I could speak she turned away, walking back to her desk. She opened the top drawer, pulled out a stack of papers, and placed them gently in my hands. "What's this?" I asked. Her eyes glistened. "The company," she said. "My father's legacy, yours now." I froze. "Isabella." She smiled, bittersweet and calm. "You earned it." The words caught me off guard, heavy with meaning I couldn't fully name. Because in that moment I realized she wasn't just giving me a company, she was giving me a piece of herself. And before I could respond, before I could tell her what I truly wanted instead, she turned back toward the window, her reflection blending with the fading light, her voice steady and quiet. "You earned it," she said again. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't sure if winning meant losing everything else. What's the point of winning everything if you lose the one who gave it meaning? The papers felt heavier than they should have. A few sheets of legal ink and signatures, yet the weight of a lifetime pressed against my hands. I sat in her office long after the board had gone, staring at the embossed seal of Devereux Industries. My name was printed neatly where hers used to be. The air was too quiet, the silence thick with everything we hadn't said. She stood by the window, the city's nightlights reflected in the glass like 1,000 watching eyes. Her posture was calm, but her fingers trembled as she crossed her arms. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked small, not weak, but human. "You earned it," she said again, her voice steady but tired. "It's yours now." I looked up at her, the glow from the skyline cutting faint gold across her face. "That's not what I wanted, Isabella." She turned slightly, confusion flickering in her expression. "Then what do you want?" "You," I said before I could stop myself. "I wanted you to stop hurting. I wanted you to breathe again, to see that the world was still kind." I pushed the papers toward her across the desk. "This," I gestured at the contract, "was never the point." She froze. "You're refusing it?" "I didn't fix your company for ownership. I fixed it because I couldn't." "Stand watching you fall apart." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. She blinked, and a single tear slipped free before she brushed it away too quickly. "You don't understand," she whispered. "This company is all I have left of my father. It's all I've ever known. And now you're giving it back," I said softly. "Because it doesn't belong to me." It never did. I signed the transfer papers right there on her desk, crossing my name out from the title deed. The sound of pen against paper echoed louder than it should have, final and absolute. When I slid them back to her, her breath caught. "Why would you do that?" she asked, her voice trembling now. "You could have had everything." I shook my head. "Everything?" I smiled faintly. "Isabella, I've had everything before. The houses, the cars, the endless meetings that fill your calendar, but not your soul. It's all noise, and I've lost it all before, too, but this time I learned something." "What?" "That none of it matters if the person standing next to you doesn't feel real." She looked at me like she was seeing me for the first time, really seeing me. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You fell for me." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I let the silence fill the space between us. Then, finally, I said, "Yes. Somewhere between rebuilding your company and trying to heal your heart, I forgot which one mattered more." She let out a shaky breath, stepping back as if she needed distance to process the words. Her eyes shimmered, not with pride this time, but with pain. "You shouldn't have," she said. "I don't deserve that." I stood, slowly, walking toward her. "You don't get to decide what you deserve. I do. And I choose you, even if all you ever let me do is watch from the sidelines." For a long time, she said nothing. The sound of the rain outside began to pick up, soft against the glass, filling the silence like a melody. She stared at the city below, at the tower lights blinking in the fog, then whispered, "I thought when my father died, I had to fill the space he left. I thought strength meant holding on to everything, even when it was killing me." Her voice cracked. "But you showed me what real strength looks like. Letting go, starting over." I wanted to reach out, to hold her, but I didn't. Not yet. She needed to find her words, her peace. She turned to me, her tears finally breaking free. "I don't want this empire anymore. I don't want to wake up every morning fighting ghosts. I want—" She hesitated, her throat tightening. "I want peace. I want to remember what it feels like to be alive." "You can," I said quietly. "But not if you keep carrying the world on your shoulders." She laughed softly through her tears. "And what about you? You spent your whole life fixing things for other people. When do you fix yourself?" I smiled sadly. "Maybe this is how I do it. By walking away before I break the one thing that's finally real." Her lips trembled, her breath catching. "You're not walking away again." "I don't have to," I said. "You're already standing on your own." For a second, the air between us felt electric, full of unsaid words and unfinished feelings. She stepped closer, her eyes locked on mine. The rain outside blurred the city lights into rivers of gold and silver, and in that soft chaos, everything else faded. The company, the power, the pain. It was just her and me. "Tell me," she whispered, "if I let go of this world, if I give up everything I've built, will you still be there?" "Always," I said, the word leaving my chest like a promise I'd been holding for a lifetime. She closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Then maybe I finally know what to choose." And for the first time since I'd met her, Isabella Devereaux looked free. Not powerful, not perfect, but free. She turned toward the door, her hand brushing against the edge of the desk, her voice barely audible. "Thank you," she said softly, "for fixing what I couldn't." My heart twisted, because even now she still didn't understand. She wasn't the one who needed saving. She took a slow step toward the exit, then another. Her shadow stretched across the floor, merging with mine, and that's when I realized, if I let her walk away again, I might never forgive myself. The air shifted, heavy with everything that had been building since the day we met. She turned to leave, but I couldn't let her walk away a second time. Healing her heart was never my goal. It was my destiny. Weeks passed before I saw her again. After that night in the office, she vanished from the city. No press, no statements, no board meetings. The world speculated endlessly that she'd sold everything, that she'd gone abroad, that she'd broken under the pressure. But I didn't care what the headlines said. I only cared about the silence that had settled where her voice used to be. Then one morning, without warning, she called. Her voice was calm this time. No panic, no tears, just quiet certainty. "There's something I need to give you," she said. "Something that belongs to both of us." She didn't tell me where to meet, just sent an address. It wasn't her penthouse or the Devereaux Tower. It was a small cafe tucked near the waterfront, the kind of place that smelled of rain and coffee and endings that might also be beginnings. When I arrived, she was already there, sitting by the window, no makeup, no bodyguards, no designer armor to hide behind. Just a woman, fragile and real, staring out at the gray sea. The morning light fell softly across her face, catching the gold in her hair and the faint shadow of sleepless nights beneath her eyes. For a moment, I stood there, unsure if I should break the spell. Then she turned, and our eyes met. And all the distance, all the pride, all the words we'd never said fell away in an instant. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi," I replied, my voice barely steady. I sat across from her. No contracts, no documents, just 2 cups of untouched coffee between us. "I left the company," she said after a long pause. "Completely. The board took over, the foundation will still run, but it's not mine anymore." I nodded slowly. You did what you needed to. I did what you taught me, she corrected gently. I let go. The words hung between us, warm and heavy. I wanted to tell her how proud I was, how she'd become the version of herself her father had always believed she could be, not because of power, but because of grace. But I didn't. I just let her speak. I went back to the house in the countryside, she continued, the one my father built before everything got big. I stayed there for a while. The garden's still alive. The air smells like him. She smiled faintly, eyes distant. I think I finally forgave him. For leaving? I asked quietly. She shook her head. For expecting me to live his life instead of mine. Silence again. But this time it wasn't heavy. It was peaceful, like a wound finally starting to close. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. She slid it across the table toward me. What's this? I asked, hesitant. Open it. Inside was a single share certificate, one symbolic share of Devereaux Industries. My name was printed on it in bold letters. I looked up, confused. It's not about ownership, she said quickly, her voice soft but firm. It's a thank you. You gave me everything I didn't know I needed. Freedom, trust, a reason to breathe again. I can't repay that, but I can honor it. I stared at the paper, then at her. You don't owe me anything, Isabella. She smiled, that small, tired, beautiful smile that had once broken through her walls. I know, but I wanted you to have something to remind you that not everything you fix is meant to be left behind. My throat tightened. And what about you? What do you have to remind you? She reached across the table and touched my hand, lightly, but enough to ground me. You, she said simply. Every time I remember how to love the world again, it'll be because of you. I didn't trust my voice to answer, so I didn't. I just turned my hand over and let my fingers intertwine with hers. No words, no promises, just the quiet recognition that sometimes love doesn't need rebuilding. It just needs to be found in the ruins. We sat there like that for a long time, two people stripped of everything but truth. Outside, the waves brushed against the shore, gentle and steady, like the rhythm of a heartbeat learning how to start again. She laughed once, a soft, disbelieving sound. Do you remember what I said that night in the boardroom? I nodded. If I could heal your heart, you'd give me the company. Her smile deepened, eyes glistening. And you did, just not the way I expected. I looked at her, really looked. The woman who had once been all sharp edges and sorrow, now sitting before me with peace in her eyes. You gave me the company, I said quietly, but I gave you back something better. Her brows lifted slightly, amused. What's that? Your heartbeat. She laughed again, the kind of laugh that carried sunlight in it this time. And just like that, the story that had begun in grief ended in something softer, something infinite. Not wealth, not victory, but healing. As we left the cafe, the wind tugged gently at her hair, the morning light catching the curve of her smile. She slipped her arm through mine, and for the first time, I didn't feel like the man who fixed things. I felt like the man who finally learned what it meant to be whole. We walked in silence down the cobblestone street, our steps unhurried, the sea murmuring behind us. And as I looked at her, this woman who had once dared me to fix what couldn't be fixed, I finally understood the truth that had been waiting all along. I didn't heal her heart for the company. I healed it because it was where I found mine. If this story made you feel something real, don't just scroll away. Hit that like button and tell me which moment stayed in your heart the longest. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss another story about love, loss, and the power of second chances. Share this video with someone who still believes that healing doesn't come from power. It comes from people. And remember, sometimes the heart you save ends up saving you.